Let's take a closer look at the global economy. Scheherazade Rehman joins us now. She is a professor of international business, finance, and international affairs at the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, first I want to get your reaction to the IMF's downgrade. Talk us through some of the major discussions taking place at these spring meetings. What will you be watching for, and is there any reason for optimism?
Well, this is not going to be a very optimistic meeting. It's going to be a very gloomy meeting with everybody in a crisis mode. The main concern that they will be debating is the trade-off that they're facing because of the Ukraine war and the pandemic that is still ongoing. And the trade-off is this: tackling inflation and safeguarding the recovery of the world economy versus supporting the vulnerable and rebuilding fiscal buffers from both issues, the pandemic and the war.
So then how will policymakers address that, trying to reach that balance, and what will it take to tackle that issue that is affecting everyone right now?
Well, it's going to take a little bit of everything, and understand that the global multilateral community, the World Bank, the IMF, major governments all around the world, including the UN and so forth, they are trying to respond to 8 critical issues all at the same time. The humanitarian crisis, trying to further stop, prevent economic fragmentation, keeping global liquidity, managing debt distress, which is prevalent across the world, tackling the inflation, climate change is not going anywhere, trying to end the pandemic, and the global trade and shifting value chains. This is quite a basket of goods that they're going to have to tackle, and all simultaneously, because you can't drop any of them.
I want to touch back on Ukraine, as that will, as you mentioned, dominate discussions. There are reports that Ukraine's prime minister and other representatives will be attending the meetings. What would you say the goals would be by this appearance, and what could be accomplished by them being there?
Well, clearly the Ukrainian goals are very, very clear. They want the Russian economy essentially brought to its knees completely. That means all oil and gas trade stopped. We are almost there. Well, we have basically crippled 80% of the economy already, but the oil and gas issue is still on the table. So they definitely want that to happen. These World Bank IMF meetings tend to try to be apolitical. They pride themselves on trying to be humanitarian in nature and where the good work needs to be done. Having said that, the Ukrainian war is anything but objective. It will be a subjective discussion in terms of how we move forward, understanding that the World Bank and IMF, the U.S. holds the majority of the voting power, and then if you add the European Union, Japan, the U.K. into this mix with Canada, there will be a shift in policy here regarding these institutions as they move forward.
I want to turn now to the lingering supply chain issues around the country. Is it all the pandemic? Are there any new solutions that will be discussed to address the supply chain crisis?
Yeah, this is going to be very, very tricky. As we all know, Shanghai is in lockdown. That's 25 million people, which is not only going to affect China's economy, but the world economy. You have to understand that when COVID hit, the combined supply and demand shocks were severe, and we expected a dramatic collapse in trade, but that didn't happen. Trade came back quite rapidly, but not trade in services. That's still sluggish. So there were disruptions in key international networks of production and trade, which prompted calls for reallocation of production domestically. And we're still in that shift right now. But with the Ukraine war and COVID still on the loose, I suspect the supply chain issues are only going to get worse, exacerbated obviously with the inflation that is following right in its heels.
So what is your global outlook for the remainder of the year? Will we see the R word that's been tossed around, recession?
I see inflation getting much worse. I'm more worried, actually, if there's a mistake on the ground in Ukraine, then all bets are off, because we're in a very different kind of war right now.
All right. Professor Scheherazade Rehman from the George Washington University. Always great to have you on. Thank you for joining us.